what's happening on Capitol Hill, one of the issues that people totally ignore, but it is literally billions and billions and billions of dollars. And that is what is in the farm bill. Now, you might think, y'all might like, okay, Roland, black people, farm, well, look, we ain't farming. But no, the food programs in America are located in the Farm Bill. Well, last week we got a chance to catch up with Janice Mathis, of course, with the National Council of Negro Women. And she, of course, was in the hearing where they were talking about that. And she lays out the importance of why we, African Americans, must pay attention to this Farm Bill going through Congress. Well, Janice, here's what's interesting. I was reading the November 2017 issue of Vanity Fair, and they had this story, and it was called Inside Trump's Cruel Campaign Against USDA's Scientists. And they also had another story about the Department of Agriculture and about how most people have no clue about the Department of Agriculture and where most of our food programs in America reside there. And at one point, they wanted to change the kind of food folks got, sort of had these little kits or whatever, and people were going, what is wrong with y'all? And you have people who are running who were saying, oh, no, that's enough food for a family of four.
It reminds you of Ronald Reagan at one point wanted to make ketchup a vegetable as part of an effort to cut back on the cost of school lunches. Very mean-spirited. Now, we can give the biggest tax cut in recent memory, and we want to pay for it with food stamps. We spent the day yesterday on the Hill in a hearing. House has passed the bill, draconian, new work requirements, all kinds of new strings attached to getting food stamps. Senate has passed a different bill that is more reasonable, more moderate. They've appointed a committee of conferees to reconcile the two bills. That hearing went on and on and on. It was remarkable to me that in a country where 1 out of every 5 children in this rich country are food insecure, that we could be talking about cutting back on SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Why is it in the Farm Bill? Because it's good for farmers. Think about it. Every time we give a family a food stamp, what can they buy with it? One thing only, and that is food. Who are they buying it from? Essentially from farmers and grocers. So it pays dividends in terms of supporting farm prices, which is one of the aims of the legislation that's being considered. It also helps children do better in school because if they got better nutrition, you're talking about taking 2 million people off of food stamps. That is immoral and it's unnecessary.
So paint me a picture. First of all, when you text me, you said no press was here.
No press. You're not going to hear this story nowhere but on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Now, the other piece is how many folk who don't look like us, who don't work on Capitol Hill, how many of them were in the room?
Oh, there were dozens. There were 150 people in the room.
But see, I'm making the case that, look, it's more broke, poor, hungry white folks in America than black folks and Latinos. Where are these white evangelicals?
More than half of all food stamp recipients are not African Americans or Latinos.
Right, and it amazes me that when it comes to fighting for these programs, we understand the importance of it, but then you have these folks out here, and then Trump supposedly caring about the white working class, saying the people who have forgotten, and these are the folks showing up at his rallies, saying, oh, no, we down with you. And I'm like, do y'all understand? He's about to jack y'all?
You couldn't be more right. I pulled some numbers looking at where the conferees, the House and Senate members come from. Places like Texas and Oklahoma, places where ain't a whole lot of people that look like me. But 70 to 80% of those SNAP recipients in those states and congressional districts are white folk. Not only that, 70% of them, 60, 70% of them work. So it's not a poverty program, it's an American dream program. There's no reason why anybody should be hungry, much food as we throw away, that anybody should be walking around wondering where their next meal is coming from. That's what the hearing was about. I got to give it to Marsh Fudge was there as a conferee, Ms. Adams was there as a conferee, David Scott from Georgia, fighting on behalf of not just black folk, because this is really not a race issue.
Right.
This is really about people. In Fudge's district,
I keep saying broke is broke.
And they were talking about, well, they're not working. They're working low-income jobs. Mm-hmm. If you're old enough, you can remember they work every day. They clean the bodies of the sick. They wipe the bodies of the sick. When they get sick, they can't afford to lie in the bed that they make up every day. It's those folk that we're fighting for today And until they get this farm bill passed, it only comes up once every 5 years.
So I remember I was on the plane and I'm reading this story, and they're quoting individuals in this story, in this Vanity Fair story, who are talking about how effective the food program was. In fact, one part of the story was a trip because they said there's a particular bank. There's this billion-plus bank that resides in the Department of Agriculture, whose job is to build projects in many towns that private companies wouldn't want to build. And there were a number of companies, number of towns in America where they had things that were rebuilt, initiatives that were funded, that banks would not fund, that revitalized those towns. And those are the same folks who voted against Obama, who said throw him out, and Trump is literally trying to whack all of those programs. And these folks are just sitting here saying, oh, that's going to make America great again.
They're not really saying that. When they think about it, when you go to rural America, rural parts of Alabama and Mississippi and Kentucky and other places, Mitch McConnell was there today. He was there defending food stamps and food programs because he understands who those programs are feeding.
Because he represents some broke white folks in Kentucky. Congressman Jim Clyburn has his Clyburn Amendment where he wants any bill passed in Congress, 10% of the resources to go to those counties where 20% or more of the people have lived below the poverty line for 30 years. Of the 400 counties that qualify, nearly 2/3 are in Republican congressional districts.
Well, that is absolutely true. Now, David Scott had an interesting proposal, and that was $5 million a year to the 19 historically black colleges and universities that are land-grant institutions that have as part of their mission farm and agriculture research to do STEAM and STEM scholarships for those students at those HBCUs. That's the kind of common sense legislation. Now, for right now, that proposal for some $95 million worth of aid to HBCUs is in the bill. It's in the Senate version of the bill. Can it stay there? Will it remain there? That's why we need people to contact their members of Congress and let them know, don't cut food stamps, don't put strings attached to it, and fund this program for HBCUs.
Well, it's critically important. And again, this is one of those things that, let's just be honest, broadcast networks won't talk about unless somehow this thing bubbles up into a huge fight. Cable news is going to ignore it because they're spending all their time talking about Bob Woodward's book, what's happening with Kavanaugh. But this is the kind of issue that happens on Capitol Hill every single day that folks ignore, that impacts real people, folks who are out there trying to bust their butt to try to make it happen in this country, trying to feed their families. And you have members of Congress who literally, especially on the House side, they just want to whack the heck out of this farm bill budget. And they want to pretty much say, the hell with these folks, y'all figure your own way out. And we're talking about feeding people, the most basic fundamental thing in a nation where we are paying people, which we also call welfare, not to grow food.
Not to grow crops.
But that's called subsidies.
That's what a big part of the debate today was about, the supplements that will go to the farmers who will let their land lie idle while to keep the farm price supports up.
All right, Janice Mathis, we appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
All right, thank you.